Hello, Weather Day 2012 here, and in the name of the moon, I punished myself by watching the entirety of the classic Sailor Moon series. Okay, I joke a little bit there. It wasn't a punishment because it was a show I wanted to watch for a long time. I'd say since around 2011. But why did it take me so long to watch it? 3 reasons. 1. The only English dub out at the time was Deacon Cloverway's dub, which not only didn't dub every season, but also made changes for the worse. 2. I was actually made fun of for wanting to see this show a decade ago because they claimed it was a show for girls. And 3. People on Twitter really wanted me to see it according to that poll I made back in April, which I made this year. And I can totally see why it's considered one of the most beloved animes of all time, due to its animation, action scenes, humor, romance, messages, friendship, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves, there's plenty of that to cover in this video. For those not in the know for some reason, Sailor Moon is about a young schoolgirl named Usagi Tsukino, who discovers a brooch given to her by Luna that lets her transform into the titular Sailor Moon, fighting the forces of evil and also making friends who are also other Sailor Guardians based around the other planets of the solar system, all while searching for the reincarnation of the Moon Kingdom's princess. Naturally, there is a lot more to it than that, but I just wanted to give a condensed version. It all started off as a manga written by Naoko Takeuchi back in December 1991, known as Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon, itself a sequel to the codenamed Sailor V manga which came out a few months earlier in August, and then a year later it became a very popular anime, which is the target focus of this video. The series did receive other things such as video games, movies, a live action series in 2003, and even a 2014 anime revival which is more faithful to the manga called Sailor Moon Crystal. But for this video I'm going to focus solely on the classic series that ran for 5 seasons and 200 episodes, plus some of the movies and specials, because why not? This is among my huge list of series I've been wanting to see for a long time, so I'm happy I got the motivation to finally work on this. So how long will it take me to watch this? Oh god. Wait, why am I making a joke about this when I've had my thoughts all written up prior? So let's get on with it. So, seeing as this is a full Sailor Moon review, why not start by talking about the first season, simply known as, well, Sailor Moon. I really enjoy how despite it technically being a serialized show with an ongoing story about a group of girls who can turn into superheroines and fighting monsters, and trying to look for the Moon Princess, it's still a slice of life for the most part. As long as you've seen certain episodes, it feels good to watch through any episode on its own. The arcs that they have within the season are well written, and are paced more or less perfectly. Even the filler episodes feel like they're worth watching. They actually offer some fun moments and interaction between the characters. And speaking of the characters, man, they're all amazing. Usagi Tsukino, Sailor Moon, is just so clumsy and naive that I really want to protect her. I'm happy they didn't make her a perfect character because that would just make her uninteresting, but I'm happy that she has those flaws. However, that isn't to say that she doesn't have any sense to her whatsoever, as she does care a lot for her friends and she does grow to have some responsibilities, for reasons I'll get into later. She also has 2 friends at school called Naru Osaka and Gurio Umino, who I found to be neat characters to start off the series before Usagi properly befriends the other Sailor Guardians. Plus I find the fact that even though Umino isn't exactly handsome, he and Naru have a nice chemistry together. I also found Luna to be a neat little conscience figure for Usagi and their relationship, and now even whenever they bicker or whenever Usagi acts like a klutz, Luna still has faith in Usagi. Plus she has plenty of funny moments and faces, like a lot of frames are sure to be the highlights. Ami Mizuno, Sailor Mercury, is very smart and very caring, and she just has a very pleasant and mostly calm personality, and it helps that she and Usagi got along really well when they first met. She sort of feels like the Velma of the entire group in a way, and just as cute. She also is able to wear goggles that can detect any threats coming her way. Her main powers involve water. Rei Hino, Sailor Mars, is among my 2 favorite Sailor Guardians, as she can be very sassy and red-headed, and she tends to take a lot of things very seriously and lose her patience and temper a lot. She's also able to sense evil auras, which is pretty nifty. I also like how she and Usagi tend to argue a lot, almost like a pair of siblings, as it shows how different their personalities really are. Her main powers involve fire. Makoto Kino, Sailor Jupiter, is tomboyish and pretty strong, and is the oldest of the Guardians. I also love her relationship with Usagi. It feels kind of relatable, and she's pretty patient with her mostly, almost like an older sister, like she's the more responsible side to Usagi's more reckless side. Usagi really loves Makoto's cooking. Additionally, it's funny whenever she sees boys, and they remind her of the one that broke her heart. Her main powers involve electricity. Minako Aino, Sailor Venus, is the other of my favorite Sailor Guardians. She's probably the nicest one of all the Sailor Guardians. I don't think she shares similar traits and interests to Usagi in a way, only less clumsy of course, but she can still do poorly in exams. One could even look at them and think that they're related. Plus it's funny whenever she tries to say famous proverbs only to mess them up somehow. She's definitely the funniest one of the Guardians. One interesting tidbit is that she is also Sailor V, who is Usagi's hero, to the point that she even has her very own video game and anime series. Also, I find it funny how she was technically the first Sailor Guardian to be conceived, but the last one to be introduced. And just like Usagi, Minako also has a cat of her very own called Artemis, who I feel has a very nice relationship with Luna, just like how Usagi and Minako do. Plus, he does feature some very iconic and funny moments in the series. I like how Tuxedo Mask looks and how mysterious he seems at first, and I always find it funny whenever Sailor Moon simps for him, even when he's Mamoru Chiba, a person who Usagi hates initially, and it's funny to see her hate on his real self but simp on his superhero persona. As for the show's animation, it's really stellar, as you can probably expect considering it's animated by Toei. I love the character animation of everyone and it feels natural and exciting. One minor gripe I have is that when it comes to the transformations and the attacks and the classic "in the name of the moon, I'll punish you" moments, you can easily tell that they recycled the animation, but considering the show looks as beautiful as it is, I can let it slide. It also helps that a lot of the parts can also look hilarious. I already mentioned how Luna can look at points, but there are many funny faces the characters make throughout the series that definitely give this series a lot of charm and a lot of rewatch value. Such as plenty of points whenever Usagi makes funny faces. There is also the fact the series has a mostly pink filter on it, which I know is the fault of Toei and their poor preservation and restoration, but on the plus side it definitely gives it some charm in a way. The villains are also very interesting, and there are plenty of them, and they're generally written very well and have some really awesome designs. Queen Beryl is pretty sinister, and it's pretty extreme that whenever her henchmen screw up enough times, she outright kills them. That's some pretty deep shit, not to mention how she's also able to corrupt people and has desires to take over both the moon and the earth. Speaking of which, they're all fascinating for different reasons. Jadeite was the initial henchman that set up the idea of having monsters for Sailor Moon and the other Guardians to fight. Although he wasn't my most favourite one of the henchmen, he definitely did set up a good impression as to how the villains in Sailor Moon would start off. Nephrite is the second henchman who actually went through very interesting development, starting off as someone who is evil, but as soon as he knows about Naru, one of Usagi's friends, and accuses her of being Sailor Moon, and after Naru also has feelings for him, his evilness slowly dies down. However, of all the villains, I feel like Zoisite is my favourite one of all of them. He doesn't take shit from anyone, and can be pretty ruthless, especially when trying to look for the rainbow crystals. That's not to mention he can turn friends and family into monsters, and he's an absolute manipulative bastard. And finally, we got Kunzite, who is also very ruthless, as I feel like he's absolutely strong, and he's able to absorb the powers that the Sailor Guardians shoot at him, and he's probably the most loyal to Queen Beryl, and of course Zoisite. Also, this show was really ahead of its time, considering that Zoisite and another henchman of Queen Beryl's, Kunzite, are actually a couple. Yeah, this show has some really nice LGBT representation and nobody looks at it weird. Nobody acts different because it's the same sex couple. They're cool with it. Dare I say it's better than the LGBT representation you get today. There's also one more villain, Queen Metalia, who is the true leader of the Dark Kingdom. I don't want to go into too much depth as this part would be considered major spoilers, but I think that she is ruthless and powerful and a bigger threat than Queen Beryl, and when you see her, you'll see why. Now, this being an action-oriented anime, you can expect the action to be awesome, and it indeed is. All the Sailor Guardians have plenty of amazing attacks, and Sailor Moon even has some weapons of her very own, such as the tiara and her stick that she can use on humans, that have been turned into monsters thanks to Zoisite. The action all feels fast-paced, and it feels very satisfying to see it all play out. And this is lifted thanks to the musical score. It's certainly an iconic score, and whenever I listen to it, it makes me want to hum along. I also feel like this series has a lot of emotion to it. Sure, this series does have plenty of comedic moments, but it also has a perfect balance of emotional and serious moments too. An example of which was when Usagi realized her big responsibilities as her being Princess Serenity, and whenever she worries about the fate of Tuxedo Mask, when Nephrite was starting off evil but Naru somehow managed to convince Nephrite not to be so evil, or the entire backstory behind Queen Serenity. Stuff like that is what makes the show work. It actually reminds me of another favourite cartoon of mine, Teen Titans. Not only because there are 5 heroes, but because there have been moments that legitimately gave me feels. Also, episodes 45 and 46 made me cry. Not going to go into too much for spoiler purposes, but those episodes emotionally destroyed me. But in a good and well written way, of course. Overall, I must say this is a very strong start for Sailor Moon as a whole. To start a series, it does it very well, setting up the characters in the status quo, and it surprisingly doesn't feel repetitive. I didn't even mind that the anime differed from the manga, considering how I think it works better that way. I can definitely see why people really consider this one of the most iconic animes of all time. Looking forward to see what Sailor Moon R has to bring to the table. Hopefully I'll have just as much to talk about. It's about time I moved on to more Sailor Moon episodes. This time we're on to its second season, Sailor Moon R, or Sailor Moon Romance to give it its full name. Is it any better, or worse, or even on par? That rhymed. Let's find out. To begin with, I didn't mind the beginning episodes too much. While I did feel like it went on for a bit compared to the first season's beginning episodes, they still offered quite a lot of fun moments and character interactions, much like the first season. Similar to how most of the filler episodes of this series have been. Well, except for one episode that we'll get to later on. One thing I appreciate is how fast they bring back the memories of Usagi and her friends after they've been wiped at the end of the first season. I also like how at the beginning of the series, Usagi just wanted to be a normal girl due to how stressful the home stretch of season 1 was, which is why she didn't really have much of a motivation to be a Sailor Guardian again. However, she does develop and she does learn to have some responsibility as being the show's main heroine. The story still feels as well paced as ever, and the characters are all still enjoyable, and the interactions are all still hilarious and cool. Minako Aino is still the funniest one of the group to me, due to how klutzy she can be. However, when the story gets to the arc with Chibiusa, the story goes on from being great to being truly awesome. One of the characters I found interesting, even if he only appears in the first few episodes, is Moonlight Knight. At first he seems to be the replacement of Tuxedo Mask for this season. In fact, under the outfit it looks just like Mamoru Chiba, but he has been seen in the same moments as Mamoru. But fear not, because he is indeed Mamoru. But unfortunately, even though Mamoru and Usagi, or their nicknames Mamo and Usako, were starting to know and love each other, they end up breaking up here due to what seems like her not being strong-minded, which I cannot lie, hits hard. However, I do like how they still rebond regardless of this. That's pretty neat, and slowly but surely, they do reconcile and get romantic feelings for each other once again. Man, I feel like the romance in this series is actually realistically written, and I think more shows should really take note from Sailor Moon. I think it's a perfect example of how to do romance that doesn't feel too forced, rushed, or contrived. This series also introduces a newcomer, Chibiusa Tsukino. I actually really like her and she's adorable as all hell. She fell from the sky during a date with Usagi and Mamoru. At first, she can be kind of a pest towards Usagi, but then their relationship grows when Usagi learns her tragic backstory. She has a key that she can use to travel through time, and she also has Luna P, which is a Luna head-shaped ball that follows her around and can also transform into different stuff to suit her needs. But she is also determined to find the silver crystal because she has no parents, so she needs it to be able to see her mother again. Also, whenever she's with Usagi and Mamoru, that reminds her of her parents, which is very wholesome. But be careful, because when she cries or screams, she lets out a large beam of energy, which can be bad considering it'll easily lure villains. This series also introduces a new Sailor Guardian, Sailor Pluto. She appears as a smart character, and she is also the one that Chibiusa, or Small Lady as she calls her, communicates to on Luna P. She is the guardian of the time door as well, and her existence is very mysterious seeing as she's a Sailor Guardian that's meant to protect the door, but she's alone too. We don't get to see too much of her this season, but it does at least open the possibility of there being more Sailor Guardians. But you will see her talk about some more when we get to season 3, don't worry. In addition to all that, I love how we finally got a brand new transformation sequence, which feels like a breath of fresh air. The new music that gives to the sequence also feels empowering and just as awesome. Not dissimilar to the rest of the score in this series. I got a feeling that that's how they'll do it for every season, which is honestly a good thing. I can imagine that to have it be the same thing throughout the entire series would get really repetitive. So of course they would think it would be a good thing to change up the sequences and animation per season. I also found the sequences of Cutie Moon Rod very satisfying whenever she kicks the villains' asses, and again the music is catchy as hell. I actually appreciate how they try to spice things up compared to the first season, and it looks like they've been getting stuff like this for each season going forward. There was also the Silver Crystal that was from the previous season that they used to redeem some people. Ale and An are a duo of villains from the season's first 13 episodes who mainly focus on draining the energy of the human race to feed their Makai tree. They also spawn Cardians, who are monsters that come from cards. I find these two villains to be pretty interesting, at least as a way to have a bit of warm-up to how balanced they're like this season. I also think their human disguises as Natsumi and Seijiro are pretty neat, and how Natsumi is a simp from Mamoru while Seijiro is a simp from Usagi can be pretty funny and leads to some arguments. But they aren't the only villains this season, nor do they even appear in most of this season. This season's main proper villains is the Black Moon Clan, with their moon symbol facing downwards. Starting off, we got Master Rubius and the Spectre Sisters, who are also trying to look for Chibiusa as she's also looking for the Silver Crystal, just like them, so they organize Silver Crystal points. Those are areas that the Sailor Guardians will most likely be around, so to stall them, they spawn monsters that they use for them to fight. The Spectre Sisters, Koan, Berthier, Pets, and Calaveras are very fun, and I love their designs and personalities and how different they are. I also like that they have some deep stuff going on, mainly in relation to Crimson Rubius, and how after what I'm about to bring up with Master Rubius very shortly, Koan managed to redeem herself, or how because of the sister's abuse, Berthier gets depressed too, and thanks to Koan she can become good too, and likewise with Calaveras. Pets take some time though due to Rubius being a massive cunt. As for Crimson Rubius himself, he's a very crafty bastard. He's able to look for crystal point targets that will make it easier to locate Chibiusa, and they are also out to kill her. Not to mention how much of a dick he is in general, to the point of outright using the sisters and even depressing Koan by rejecting and destroying her gift and saying they weren't a couple. So yeah, he's an absolute douchebag. Another member of the Black Moon clan is Esmeralda. I found her to be absolutely fun, and she kinda gives the same amount of energy as a Soy Sight from the first season. Not to mention her design is pretty sexy and she has a pretty iconic laugh. She's also able to spawn droids from Darkhenge, which is pretty cool. But man, was she an absolute riot, and definitely proves the show can have a great balance of humor and serious stuff. Prince Demand is the main head of the entire Black Moon clan, similar to Queen Beryl from season 1. He can be a manipulative dickwad, especially when it comes to the relationship between Usagi and Mamoru. He also has a brother named Saphir, who I actually feel was interesting enough with his backstory. I do like him well enough, and his design is pretty neat, but I do also feel like he can also be easily manipulated as well, especially with Wiseman, but Demand is still a douche. Finally, we have Black Lady, who is a version of Chibiusa also corrupted by Wiseman, who keeps spreading bad memories to her. I find her to be an interesting adversary, however I don't want to go on too much about her for too long as I'm not a spoiling git. Now I know I've been gushing all over the series so far, but unfortunately episode 67 is the closest to an episode being bad. For one, the Black Moon clan doesn't appear. The closest villain we get is a volcano that is about to destroy a dinosaur Chibiusa befriends and their mother. And also the fact that dinosaurs appear in this episode make it feel too ridiculous, even for a show like Sailor Moon. It's the only filler episode I saw so far that actually did feel like filler. It reminded me too much of those 2-segment episodes of Sonic SatAM that focused on Antoine. But would I consider this to be worthy of docking half a star to the score of this season? Honestly, not really. But hey, it's not all bad. Much like the first season, this series has a lot of feels, like with Chibiusa's parents and how she desperately wants to get back to them, or the tragic backstories behind the Spectre sisters, or even the entirety of Usagi trying to get Mamoru to love her again. And man, this climax is really awesome, and nail-biting, and even tear-jerking. All this makes this season a worthy continuation to the first one. So overall, I honestly really love it just like the first season, possibly even a little bit more. I love how the action is still on point, and I find the new characters introduced all fascinating, and Chibiusa is one of the cutest things ever conceived. I find the romance to be more interesting to know about, considering how Mamoru, despite splitting up with Usagi, still has some feelings somewhat to her. And man, I still feel the feels are strong with this one, not unlike the first season. So we're now 44.5% done with the series. I'm excited to see what Sailor Moon S has in store, but there's also a movie and a special this season I have to see before I well and truly finish. But those are getting their own reviews that you'll see very shortly, so hold on to your socks. So I figured I would watch the short stuff here too while I marathon everything Sailor Moon related. So I decided I would start off by watching the short that played before the Sailor Moon R movie. This is a pretty neat and fun little short film, even if it is mainly focused on telling the other viewers about the previous Sailor Guardians, as Usagi and Chibiusa listen on two girls' conversation about all the Sailor Guardians and talk about who's the smartest, Sailor Mercury, the most beautiful, Sailor Mars, the strongest, Sailor Jupiter, and the leader, Sailor Venus, and someone who always saves the Guardians, Tuxedo Mask. And all while Usagi gets continuously pissed that none of them are her, but also thinking about how the roles they play out as her friends. Also, I do really enjoy the animation, both the new animation and the recycled, and it is pretty neat to see that it looks sharper due to it being on film. It makes me wonder how a film presenting the first season would look. Plus, it feels great to hear the season 1 score and attacks again after so long. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about this short. I really enjoyed it a lot. While I already got full knowledge of the season at this point, it does serve as a good introduction to people who haven't yet to see the movie that succeeds this short. Awesome stuff overall. Now it's time for me to start watching the Sailor Moon movies. Or at least one of them, considering I've finished the season this respective movie is meant to represent. Now I've been contemplating about if I should even watch these at all, considering that I wasn't sure when to watch them. I could have watched them before each season, or after, or even in between. But then I read that it's best to watch them after each season, so that way I don't get too confused. Furthermore, they're only an hour long each, so what harm would there be in watching them? So what is this movie about exactly? Well, it actually centers around Mamoru and his past. He knows of a childhood friend called Fiore, an alien who actually cares deeply for Mamoru. This causes Usagi to become skeptical because she always saw Mamoru as being her boyfriend, but she never had any thought that he might swing the other way. Meanwhile, he plants a flower called the Ksenian flower, which, while meant for Mamoru, also causes everyone on Earth to lose their energy and eventually die. So it's up to the Sailor Guardians to save the day, defeat Fiore and his monsters and save Mamoru/Tuxedo Mask. I actually don't mind this movie's story too much. Sure, it might have been a tad simple, but who cares? After an entire season, it feels kind of relieving to get a movie that's its own story. It sort of reminds me of the Makai Tree arc from Sailor Moon R with Ale and An, and Fiora even reminds me a little bit of Ale. It's a story that technically isn't needed to see, but to miss out on it would mean you miss out on all the funny moments, character development, and action-packed scenes. And not only is this story interesting, it still feels well-paced, which I was surprised to say too. Considering this movie is only an hour, you would worry that this movie would feel rushed, but it isn't. It is paced like a proper film. It doesn't feel too rushed nor too padded out, so hats off to you, Toei Animation. You actually succeed at doing great pacing with Sailor Moon. Even though Fiora is the main antagonist of this film, he actually is somewhat sympathetic. He was actually with Mamoru when his parents died, which is an event that is seen in Season 1, so he did care for him quite a lot, to the point of even thinking that other humans are selfish. So in a way, he is a tragic character. This also makes Mamoru more of an interesting character because it shows more about his past and how it appeared that he had a friend that supported him. I know it's not outright said or suggested in this movie, but judging by how Fiora cares immensely for Mamoru, people have interpreted him as being gay. And you know what? I'm not against that at all. If anything, I'm happy that there's more potential LGBT representation in the series, similar to how we got Kunzai and Zoi's side from Season 1. As for Mamoru being bisexual, I'm not overly against that either, but I do know deep down his heart beats for Usagi. I also love how in this movie, Chibiusa actually shows to be more of a motivational figure for Usagi when she feels like giving up. It shows that even though Chibiusa is a sweet and cute little girl, she can be really mature surprisingly. And man, it feels tragic to see how some of the people treated Ami, Rei, Makoto, and Minako were when they feel down in the dumps, and that they needed Usagi to cheer her up. It's nice to see that the feels still haven't disappeared. The animation in this film looks to be a massive step up from the series. It looks a lot more crisp, and the colors feel a lot more balanced here than in the show. Plus, it feels awesome to finally see Sailor Moon in widescreen. And you know how I am. With movies based on shows go out of its way to improve on the visuals that the original series is based on. Even the recycled animations don't feel too bad because thanks to the visuals having color correction and looking crisp, it doesn't feel too out of place. And I also love how each Sailor Guardian has their own transformation theme, and even the transformation themes and battle music seem to have been overhauled too, which is pretty awesome to hear. It makes it feel more grandiose, almost like it's fit for a cinematic outing. So overall, would I say this movie is worth watching? Sure. If you're a fan of Sailor Moon like I am, then this movie is just more of what you will really enjoy. Action, romance, characters and all. It even had a pretty interesting villain, so that was much appreciated. My main complaint is that he is only a one-off, which is a shame. But if I were to recommend this movie to anyone, definitely see it when you've finished its respective season. Don't watch it before the season, and not in the middle. Watch it after. This isn't a movie you can just jump into all willy-nilly. If you do that, you'll probably end up disappointed and confused. So yeah, awesome and fun flick. Oh boy, so we got the first 2 seasons out of the way, which means we are 2 down and we only have 3 to go. So with that, here goes my review of the 3rd season, Sailor Moon S, or Sailor Moon Super as its full title is. Interestingly, this is the first season not to be dubbed by Deke when it first aired, instead it was taken over by Cloverway, and it's also the first season to not air in the UK. Not that any of that matters, because I'm still watching the superior Viz dub anyway, hahaha. And what do I think of this season, especially when compared to the already awesome first 2? Well, let me say exactly what I think of Sailor Moon S. It's honestly the best season so far. From start to end, everything feels like an improvement. The animation looks better and more refined, and the humor tries to be more varied than the first 2 seasons. I'd even say it's probably the funniest season. Sure, there's still some recycled animation, but at this point, I'm used to it. No use complaining. The story feels a lot better paced, and the fact that the first few episodes waste no time in terms of storytelling make this really satisfying to sit through. There's no filler episode that feels too wasteful, nor is there any mini story that doesn't really add to the main one too much. It's pure fun. The score in this one is also really awesome and intense, not to mention memorable. I find myself always humming along to the songs because they're that catchy. It's also kind of interesting that the girls are focusing on studying and less on romance. I want to start by talking about the villains for a change, though we'll talk about the rest of them as the review goes on. The main group of villains this season is the Deathbusters. They're looking for pure hearts to initially find the 3 talismans so they can seek the Holy Grail and use its power to open the Messiah to cause the end of the world. This organization is formed by the main villain this season, Dr. Tomoe, who we'll get to later on. One of his henchmen, Kaola Knight, is the first villain that we come across this season. She plants demon eggs around to gather pure hearts from people. I honestly consider her the hottest non-redeemed villain so far. Yes, more than Queen Beryl, and she's a pretty awesome villain in her own right. She has the right amount of sinister in her, but she's also very enjoyable to watch too. This is the season to introduce two of the series' most popular Sailor Guardians that the season wastes no time introducing, Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune. At first they appear to be the new saviors against the monsters that are the strongest yet. However, they are also seeking the talismans and pure heart crystals and trying to get them first. As a result, even though they're friends as civilians, as Sailor Guardians they have a bit of a rivalry. I appreciate that as it shows that they don't start off as being friends from the beginning, and it takes time to develop, and it can even cause some drama when they discover that their friends were Sailor Guardians. In fact, they even give back the pure heart crystals back to other Guardians to show that they aren't entirely horrible people. I also find their backstory and how they met and how they became Guardians very touching. Haruka Tenno, Sailor Uranus, is another tomboy character. Yeah, more of a tomboy than even Makoto Kino, to the point that when she was first introduced, Usagi and Minako thought that she was male. She has a fascinating for race car driving. I also love how she nicknames Usagi as Bunhead, just like Mamoru used to. She can also be kinda snarky, which certainly adds to her charm, and it works well. I also like how she eventually learns to befriend Sailor Moon after they spend some time together, even if they have completely different motives. Her main powers involve earthquakes. And then we have her partner, Michiru Kaio, Sailor Neptune. She is an excellent violinist, and she is also a mostly calm and elegant character. She is the more feminine one compared to Haruka's more masculine one. She is also a very understanding character, and she knows that even if they take away a pure heart crystal of the talisman, it means they would have to sacrifice the owner. Her main powers involve waves. I also love the relationship that they have and how realistic it is. It shows that even back in the 90s they were respectful during LGBT representation, first with Kunzai and Zoisai and now with them. Haruka and Michiru are even referred to as a couple. It makes me happy that I have something from the 90s that does LGBT with respect. And shame on you, Cloverway, for trying to turn them into cousins while not even trying to hide their romantic interactions. Usagi also receives a new transformation brooch after her silver crystal gets broken. This honestly feels like an interesting and unique way to change up some things that Sailor Moon doesn't feel formulaic or boring. Her new brooch, the Spiral Heart Rod, is pretty awesome and I love the transformation here. That should really go without saying. And the attack she does with it is powerful as hell and so satisfying. It should be no surprise that the action is still awesome, and even feels more intense seeing as some of the Sailor Guardians are the ones that are captive, which gives it some stakes. Oh, and when Sailor Moon uses the Holy Grail, she's able to transform into a new form, Super Sailor Moon. An all-powerful being that can easily defeat baddies, and combining with the rod offers some neat animation and a bop of a song to go with it. Still feels completely satisfying. Oh yeah, Chibiusa returns in this one too, and that's not all, because she is also another Sailor Guardian, Sailor Chibi Moon. It feels great to see her again, especially since she doesn't appear throughout the first 3 episodes, but she was one of the highlights of Sailor Moon art to me, so of course it was awesome to see her again. Her pink sugar heart attack might seem kinda not strong at first, but it shoots out of hearts that can definitely be painful, especially if it's to someone's face, even if it is limited. She'd been sent to the future by her mom, Neo Queen Serenity, to train to become a proper Sailor Guardian, and also to find some more friends to play with in the 20th century. I also like how her transformation feels like a nice callback to the first season. As I promised in my Sailor Moon R review, I did say I would talk more about Sailor Pluto, and indeed, she also returned. Setsuno Meo, Sailor Pluto, is, as I previously said in that review, the guardian of the time door with a mysterious existence. This time we see her as a civilian, and we see her out of that dimension. She's a really awesome character once I get to know even more of her, because she has the ability to return talismans and is a very powerful girl. I also like how she joined into the battles now too. It's mainly due to how dangerous this mission is. She's also the one that explained to the Outer Guardians that are at the end of the world. Her main powers involve time. The main villain this season is the aforementioned Dr. Tomoe. He can also be pretty creepy in many points, mainly because whenever his face is shown, it's usually in silhouette with a giant ass grin and huge bright circles for eyes. Creepy as hell, but I still find him neat. He's also one of the most sadistic and vicious villains who wants to essentially cause World Death Day. Udial is one of the people that works for Dr. Tomoe. She is a part of the Witches 5. She appears not to take crap from anyone this time, and she doesn't play games, and the way she takes the pure heart crystals is by finding people and shooting them with a huge gun. She also packs daemons in boxes that she produces herself for the Sailor Guardians to fight. I think that she's more vicious than Kaolinite, to the point that she would literally kill off people for pure heart crystals without any remorse. The final Sailor Guardian introduced is Hotaru Tomoe, Sailor Saturn. She is a shy girl that isn't used to having friends due to her traumatic past, so when Chibiusa offers to be her friend, it makes her happy. I love the chemistry that Hotaru and Chibiusa have. One thing that feels suspicious is the characters also have a bad feeling that she's connected to the Deathbusters, because they need to give her pure hearts so that they can open the Messiah of Silence to cause the end of the world. She also has intense powers that she does on daemons, which makes Haruka concerned that she's not one of the good ones. Unfortunately, the Outer Guardians want to kill her to prevent the end of the world because she is also the Guardian of Destruction and the Messiah of Silence, while the Inner Guardians want to protect her because she's a nice girl. I like how that adds to the rivalry between the groups of Guardians. Additionally, she's the only Sailor Guardian to not awaken on the first episode she appears in. It takes a while for her to awaken. Another villain we see is Mehmet, who is part of the Witches 5. I find her to be pretty bubbly and cute, and a very enjoyable character. I also love how despite being a villain, she doesn't seem hateable. After all, she has a crush on the men she's meant to steal the pure hearts from. Plus, she loves to read and watch stuff while on the job, but that doesn't mean she's incompetent. She's able to create daemons that outright eat the pure heart out of people. Crazy stuff. The rest of the Witches 5, aside from Udile and Mehmet, include Telu, Yui, and Cyprine, each more ruthless than the last. And finally, we got Mistress 9, the real Messiah of Silence, but I don't want to go too much depth on her, because that would really go into spoiler territory. But let's just say that she means shit. More than Dr. Tomoe even. But that's as far as I'll explain. This is seriously the darkest Sailor Moon story so far. I know I say this all the time, but I felt emotional throughout the whole thing. There were moments that made my heart beat faster than normal, or when I was getting warmer due to the suspense and the mystery of the talismans, or how Usagi believes that there is another way to save the world without them, or basically the entirety of Otaru's story and how Chibiusa and Usagi still believe that Otaru is a good person. Man, I feel so bad for her. And I just want to say this right now. Screw episode 110 to oblivion. Not because it's a bad episode. Far from it, it's another awesome one. One of the best as a matter of fact. I'd say that because I haven't felt emotion like this since the finale of season 1. No spoilers of course, but man. So overall, Sailor Moon S is by far the best season of the series. I know I say that quite a lot, but this time I really mean it. It looks like they fixed up the kinks from the previous seasons and improved them so that it feels better paced and better flowed. Helping is the nicer looking animation and the new characters that I really love. Not to mention how much darker the story is. While Sailor Moon and Sailor Moon are on awesome and near perfect starts, Sailor Moon S is when shit gets real. It's similar to how I feel about the Sonic games really. But what will Supers have in store? Only time will tell. But first, Sailor Moon S has a movie too, just like Sailor Moon R. So I guess I should check that out too. Right, time for me to start watching another Sailor Moon movie, and this time it's the Sailor Moon S one. Does the best Sailor Moon season also spawn the best Sailor Moon movie? Let's find out. Seeing as I saw the Sailor Moon R movie, I come to expect that the story doesn't really take place anywhere within the story of the season, meaning no villains in the season, no Witches 5, no Deathbusters, no Hotaru, no Pure Hearts even. Just a simple standalone story that works best when you saw all the season, and learn to appreciate the new characters and elements that do appear. But what is the story this time? Well, the whole of Tokyo has been affected by snowstorms thanks to the Snow Queen Kaguya, who's come back to freeze over Earth to make it hers again. The only way to do that, though, is by possessing the Ice Crystal, so it's up to the Sailor Guardian to make sure that doesn't happen. Meanwhile, Luna catches a cold and nearly gets hit by a car. Luckily, she gets saved by a man named Kakeru Osora, who they share a bonding with, to the point that even Luna falls in love with Kakeru. However, he is also the one in possession of said Ice Crystal, as he feels pain whenever it shines. I find it really cool that they actually try to do 2 side plots with this movie, and they're both told really well. Since it's only an hour too, the pacing feels just right. Similar to the previous movie, and none of it feels like they go on forever. The action is awesome as you would expect, and the climax is quite epic too. Just like the animation with the Sailor Moon R movie, the animation looks much nicer and cleaner. The colors are corrected, and I like how they actually do new animation when both Sailor Moon and Sailor Chibi Moon go, "We'll punish you!" simultaneously, giving new life to a normally recycled clip. This movie shares a very interesting romance, and it's actually with Luna and Kakeru. Of course, it's a one-sided relationship, and Luna is the one to be in love with Kakeru, but I do find their relationship very nice. Kakeru properly cares for Luna, and Luna loves being pampered by him. Unfortunately, she does also wish that she wasn't a cat and that she was a human, so that she can repay the favor to him when she feels sick himself, and to just be together in general. In fact, she actually probably gets interested in all this romance stuff that humans love so much, including kissing. I also like the character of Kakeru too. He actually wanted to be an astronaut himself, but due to his health, he couldn't. He also has a partner who has a crush on him, Himeko Naotake, who is actually properly an astronaut. The only issue is that the stories that Kakeru believes seem very far-fetched for Himeko to believe, even when Usagi tells her, so she can be pretty stubborn. I know what I'm saying might be confusing, but it's one of those times where they write multiple couple stories, but they do it well. And man, I feel sorry for Luna in this movie. All she wanted was to fall in love, but due to the fact they're 2 completely different species, that of course can't really happen. Punches you straight to the heart even when you see her actually crying. which is a rarity, and the delivery, both in the Japanese dub and the Fizz's English dub, feel realistic and heart-wrenching to the point you couldn't help but give her a hug. In general, it feels cute to see her acting like a cat, and the ribbon she has on is simply adorable. As for Queen Kaguya, she's alright. She has an army of snow dancers that she uses to do her bidding, including finding the whereabouts of this crystal that she needs to freeze over Earth. I don't really consider her my favourite villain in the Sailor Moon series, admittedly. She can be fun, but I think in terms of Sailor Moon villains in film, Fiore was a more interesting character. Now, I will admit that this movie does have a few issues. Not too many to dock enough points, but I do want to get them out of my hair. As much as I like the romance in this movie, it feels like the romance happens more than the action. And also, although Haruka, Michiru, and Setsuna and their Sailor Guardian forms appear, they feel a little underutilized in this. Thinking about it, actually, most of the Sailor Guardians, aside from Sailor Moon and Chibi Moon, don't appear too much either until the end. And like I mentioned, I only find Queen Kaguya to be fine. But that isn't enough for me to hate this movie. I love it, and besides, it doesn't hamper my enjoyment of the series whatsoever. So overall, I find Sailor Moon S the movie to be a lot of fun, not dissimilar to the previous movie. The action felt exciting, the romance is very sweet and emotional, and I like how we get to see a lot more of Luna in this movie. Though I'm gonna be honest, as much as I love this movie, I think the Sailor Moon R movie is a bit better. I just find the story to that one a little better, and Fiore was a better written villain. I don't hate this movie, this is a good movie. An awesome movie as a matter of fact, and I do still recommend this movie to Sailor Moon fans. To newcomers, just finish season 3 first. Like the previous movie, don't watch this all willy-nilly, or you'll get disappointed and confused. Overall, awesome movie, not a masterpiece. Kinda funny the best Sailor Moon season only gets the second best movie. And yes, because Tuxedo Mask disguises as Santa Claus, this is automatically a Christmas movie. Sorry, but I don't make up the rules. We finished through 3 whole seasons of Sailor Moon, and now we got ourselves to the 4th season, Sailor Moon Supers. I admit I don't really know what to expect from this, since from what I read, this is often considered the worst season. But I'm going in with an open mind. And what do I think? Well, while I think the season is still great and enjoyable, I do also think it isn't quite as good as the seasons preceding it. For once in this review, I'm going to start off a little negative, because while I overall enjoyed it a lot, there were quite a few issues I had. My main gripe is that the story can feel kinda dragged out, as for most of this series it's about villains trying to look inside people's dreams for Pegasus. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but the filler episodes really don't feel like they add much. I also feel a bit disappointed that the outer Sailor Guardians don't return, which is a shame because of how awesome they were, and the potential for story ideas feels missed. Plus, for a decent amount of the beginning part of the season, most of the inner Sailor Guardians don't participate in the battles. I do miss when they acted like a team together, so whenever they appear as Guardians together, it feels like a treat rather than the norm. At least in the second half when the Amazonas Quartet appear, they get a bit more screen time, which I appreciate. But hey, considering that I was expecting the season to be extremely weak and honestly terrible, I can't deny it when I say that this was a pleasant surprise. The animation and humor is still great to see. I really enjoyed the improved shading this season. I think the story, while a little dragged out at points, is pretty interesting as well, and the villains are great too, as well as the focus more on romance again. Additionally, I find it very interesting that now they go from Usagi and Chibiusa to Super Sailor Moon and Chibi Moon. That's pretty interesting, though it does mean I do miss their normal sailor forms. But never mind, that's just nitpicking. Let's talk about Pegasus. He's a vision that Chibiusa sees, but when his name is called out by Chibiusa in battle, he arrives on the scene. His design is pretty interesting, and I like his powers. He's also a transcending being that can even withstand being trapped in a cage. I like the relationship that Pegasus and Chibiusa had together, and I find him to be very mysterious with his origins and where he lives. However, there is a reason for this. This is because if Chibiusa ever found out the truth behind him, or if anyone else in the real world knew about him, he would have to leave her and seek another host. But I'm also happy to see the two of them being friends, and how she asked him for advice and other stuff. It feels pretty cute. We also get a new transformation sequence involving Sailor Moon and Sailor Chibi Moon with him. They transform into super forms of them, and the rod becomes more powerful by turning into a weapon that can shoot bullets with really awesome music to boot. Their brooches have also got a big upgrade from Pegasus, and they can get these powers by saying, "Moon Crisis, make up!" And with that they can transform into Super Sailors Moon and Chibi Moon. Their transformations get a makeover as well, with the Kaleido Moon Scope and Crystal Carillon. I love how they look, and it feels like the biggest overall to the Sailor Guardians arsenal yet. The other inner Sailor Guardians also get new transformation sequences this season, and I'm gonna say, I'm glad that they did. With much nicer animation, I think it was a perfect opportunity to show it, with some new transformations. Furthermore, they are the Sailor Guardian super forms. I feel like they do look cool, but not that much different from Super Sailor Moon and Super Sailor Chibi Moon. But again, I can't complain too much. This series also introduces another cat character, a purple-grey kitten named Diana. She fell from the sky from traveling back in time, just like what happened with Chibiusa back in Sailor Moon R. She's actually the future daughter of Luna and Artemis, but when she is first introduced, it's treated as if Artemis was cheating on her with a nun, so because of that, Luna is pissed off, and so is Minako for him not telling her. But of course, because she has a crescent moon on her forehead and she can talk, naturally she is related to the two of them. And as it turns out, she is the cat mentor of Chibiusa, just like how Usagi has Luna and Minako has Artemis. I actually really like her design, and I think it's cute to see that Luna and Artemis eventually become a couple. I mean, they are both talking cats with crescent moons on their foreheads, so it was a given, but still. Furthermore, I think she can have her moments, like she was legit curious on what 2 timing was, or when she said being nosy looks fun. But I do also wish she appeared more frequently, so we learned a lot more about her character. Overall, she's solid. For the first 22 episodes, yes, literally about 56% of the season, the main villains are the Amazon trio, Tiger's Eye, Fish's Eye, and Hawk's Eye. They are the main henchmen for Madame Zirconia, who has a staff with an eye called Zircon, who might add is really ruthless. They are focusing on looking for humans whose photos are given to them. They have beautiful dreams by trapping them inside chambers and looking into them so they can capture Pegasus, so that they can get the power from his horn, their golden crystal, so that they become human again. All of them can be pretty vicious, and they don't particularly give a shit if the person they look into dies after they look into the dreams and don't find Pegasus. But I actually really enjoy their banter, and I love Tiger's Eye's very flamboyant voice. It's also interesting how Fish's Eye is androgynous. Even though he's male, he looks super feminine, and you wouldn't be blamed if you thought he was female, and he even disguises himself as a lady in many episodes. They're all like a bunch of siblings, always bickering with each other, and they're really enjoyable. They also are able to spawn monsters of the day who are circus people because the Amazon trio work at the Dead Moon Circus and so can spawn them. I do like them as a whole, but my main gripe is that for more than half the season, it focuses mostly on them, which can make it feel very dragged out and it can even feel fatiguing. Not helping is a lot of the episodes feel like filler, so it's one of those few times that in Sailor Moon where the pacing kinda gets dragged out. And that's a shame because even with the series' filler episodes, the filler never felt too padded and could even have very memorable episodes. Thankfully, the pace picks up and we get more plot important episodes eventually, and they even have some character growth, so at least the slow pacing isn't played from start to end. The next group of villains, the Amazonas Quartet, comprising Seri Seri, Pala Pala, Jun Jun, and Ves Ves, are a group of young girls who are also henchwomen for Zirconia. I like how rebellious they can be towards Zirconia, and their powers are pretty neat. They all feel like Zirconia, who they refer to as Granny, doesn't really deserve Pegasus, and that they should have him for themselves. They are also able to hypnotize people that they can use to find the golden mirror that has Pegasus. My favorite one might be Pala Pala because she looks the most innocent, but a saint she ain't. Plus she referred to herself in the third person. I think I prefer them over the Amazon trio myself, even if they're doing a similar job to them, but this time they have to find the mirror Pegasus in hiding in rather than Pegasus himself. They sort of remind me of the Spectre sisters from Sailor Moon R. At least at this point, the other Guardians appear regularly and they even get new attacks, which is pretty exciting. Queen Nehelenia is the queen of the Dead Moon. She needs to host the gold mirror that Pegasus is in so that she can escape. I must say, her design is really awesome and she also has the body of Helios. She's quite menacing and impatient as a result, to the point of even turning the whole world to darkness to just find the whole golden crystal. That's what I feel makes her interesting and threatening. But now, the last bunch of episodes in this season definitely feels like the best part, and that's where the most of the plot development comes from. It feels very interesting to learn that Pegasus' world, Elysion, is being ruined due to the Dead Moon looking for the golden crystal, or how he's revealed to also be Helios. It feels great to finally learn some more about Pegasus. It makes me wish that that was the case throughout the whole season rather than near the end. The humor feels just like the original seasons at this point. I love them, but there's also emotion as usual, and you would even feel some sympathy for the Amazonas Quartet. No heavy spoilers, of course. I don't want to give too much away, do I? In conclusion, while I wouldn't say that Supers is as good as the previous 3 seasons, and I do admit it has its flaws, I still think the action is very fun, the villains can be very enjoyable, and I actually appreciate them trying to focus a little more on Chibiusa, even though the series is named Sailor Moon. I would never consider this season to be absolutely bad, but I can totally understand why people would consider this the weakest. The story feels padded out with the first half that I think could have easily been condensed or have variety with other villains, and I feel like there were some opportunities with the previous seasons that felt missed. It makes you want to see the second half more. If they really needed to have an episode quota, they could have started it with a mini-season, just like with Sailor Moon R. But I must reiterate, I didn't hate this season. It might be flawed, but the good definitely outweighed the bad. And at the end of the day, it wouldn't ruin how I felt about the rest of this amazing series. Maybe the next time I see it, I might skip a lot of the episodes. I just hope the next season can go back to being as great as the first three. So that means there's only one season left with Sailor Stars. Very excited to see how the entirety of this original Sailor Moon series concludes. But first, we got a super special movie and short to see. This might take a while, but we did make it this far. It would be silly to stop now. Now it's time for me to watch the Sailor Moon Super Special. Interestingly, this is the season to have the most in terms of content. Not only does it have a season, but it has a special, a movie, and a short. So yeah, there is a lot to see here. But for now, let's start off with the special. Also, for a change, I'm going to talk about each of the segments in this special and talk about the things I liked in them. This special is interesting in that it's essentially 3 exclusive episodes in one. The first episode is a retelling from Luna to Chibiusa about how Usagi became a Sailor Guardian in the first place, how the Sailor Guardians were all formed, and a recap of the first season overall. Being a recap, I know that one pretty much reuses the animation from the first season of the series, and music too. But considering this is all in flashback, I appreciate how we get to see Sailor Moon's humble beginnings all over again, with some commentary from Usagi, Chibiusa, and Luna, plus a little bit from Artemis too. Additionally, seeing as this would have been 4 seasons up to this point, I appreciate them doing a recap for the first part of the special. Of course, it doesn't mean I did suffer from PTSD from the finale of the season, but you know what? It was worth it. And not only does it cover the first season recap, but also a little bit from the second season, featuring the introduction of Chibiusa and the Black Moon Clan, and the third season featuring Sailor Chibi Moon, and of course Sailor Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. Felt really cool to see all this stuff, especially as someone who took a while to see Sailor Moon up to this point. But of course I already did reviews of the first 3 seasons, unless you skipped ahead, in which case, cheater. The biggest issue I have is this part is of course a clip show, but to be fair, Chibiusa did ask about how Usagi became a Sailor Guardian, and I think the show can get away with it. The second episode actually discusses the whereabouts of Haruka and Michiru in the season. Wait, they actually returned in this special? Hallelujah! If you remember my Sailor Moon Supers review, I felt very disappointed about how none of the outer Guardians returned in that season, which felt like immense disappointment considering that had a lot of storytelling potential. So to see Sailors Uranus and Neptune in this season feels surreal, but I'm not complaining whatsoever. Even more amazingly, this part focuses solely on Haruka and Michiru. Neither Sailor Moon nor any of the other Guardians appear in this segment. In this episode, the 2 of them stay in a hotel during vacation, but Haruka has a fever. Not only that, but Michiru feels like something is amiss in the hotel, which being a Sailor Moon related thing, they're not wrong. As it turns out, everyone in the hotel is being possessed by a ventriloquist with a dummy who wants to get the energy from the people. I like the design of the dummy himself and how he was actually the one in control of the ventriloquist, which is an interesting change of idea. This segment I think is my favourite one because of its fight scenes, the fact Haruka and Michiru actually return, and that Michiru totally cares for Haruka like the girlfriend she is. And again, I like the dummy's design, and the fact he's part of the Dead Moon Circus definitely confirms this is part of season 4. It just makes me wish they actually appeared in the season more. That rhymed. The final episode of the special focuses on Chibiusa and how she suspects that the new transfer student in the school, Lilica Hubert, is actually a vampire. She takes note of her behaviour, such as eating the flowers and how she lives in a mansion. But of course, when Chibiusa and her friends come to her house, she tells them that she isn't, and that the flowers she eats were just flower-shaped candies, and she's just a sweet girl. But things aren't all as they seem, and she is indeed a vampire, and that truly sucks. Shut up, me. This is actually an adaptation of a story from the manga during the Black Moon arc, but I find it interesting that they turned it into a super story for the anime. This might be my second favourite of the segments in this special because I like how it focuses on Chibiusa, and as you would expect, the action is awesome. Plus it does have its humour too, like how Mamoru is the one who has to pay for the garlic fest. Of course, Usagi and Chibiusa transform into Super Sailor Moon and Super Sailor Chibi Moon, and even Pegasus makes an appearance, which does make it feel a lot more like Supers. But in this case, I don't mind it. After all, it feels refreshing to have the villain not be any of the Dead Moon Circus, and it feels doubly refreshing to have the story not revolve while looking into others' dreams, or finding the golden mirror that holds Pegasus. And so, I would rank the seasons like this. Haruka and Michiru return, the ghostly puppet play, Chibiusa's adventure to a vampire mansion of terror, and a beautiful transformation, the journey and growth of the crybaby Usagi. So yeah, this was a pretty neat and fun special overall. I like the different stories that it offered, the action is what you expect, as is the animation, and I personally find it to be the peak of the season. Honestly, it makes me wish that we got more of these stories in the season proper, but what's done is done, of course. Supers is still an alright season, but I'm just amazed to find that this special is probably the best part of it. I'm still shocked to say that I saw Haruka and Michiru in a Supers related thing. Only a movie and a short to go. Another day, another Sailor Moon movie, and this time it's based on Sailor Moon Supers. Just like the previous movies, do not set in any particular part of the season, they just feature familiar set pieces. However, also being based on Supers, a season I don't think is horrible, but I also don't think it was as good as the first three. I have no idea what to expect with this, so with that in mind, let's do this. The story in this one is that the kids all around the world have been disappearing by the Queen Badian, who plans to use their energy to create a black dream hole that will consume the entire Earth. The way she gathers kids is by using Poopalin to play music that lures kids to her ship, so it's up to the Sailor Guardians to make sure the villains don't get away with this malefic scheme. Unfortunately, Chibiusa also gets herself involved and gets lured into one of their ships, which means she also finds out what the things that Queen Badian plans to do with all the children. Put them inside dream coffins where the kids sleep forever, giving her a chance to use their energy. I like the story quite a lot, and it feels really grandiose, which of course you would expect in a movie based around Sailor Moon. While I would still say that the Sailor Moon R movie had a slightly better story with a more interesting and deep villain, to say that this movie doesn't have an epic scale to pack in just an hour would be just lying. Plus, being a Sailor Moon movie, pacing is great and snappy, and also doesn't feel very rushed despite the short runtime, and the action and humor is exactly what you would expect regarding Sailor Moon. And also, not unlike Supers, this movie has a focus on Chibiusa, which I thought was nice to see. I know some people dislike Chibiusa, but I never did, so that felt neat. Also, am I the only one that finds this song that Poopalin plays to be really catchy? Their new characters introduced in this movie were very interesting, and dare I say, the villains in this movie were somehow better than the actual villains from the actual season 4. There are 4 fairies in this movie that Queen Badian recruits: Poopalin, Orangeat, Banan, and the only one who's on the hero's side, Pearl. Poopalin is a manipulative guy, indeed, and is able to easily mind control and lure people, not just with kids getting on the ship, but also creating hallucinations of the Sailor Guardians, like them getting inside a gingerbread house. He, along with Orangeat and Banan, is also able to create bomb babies with his flute and use them as attacks, with Poopalin's being blue, Orangeat's being pink, and Banan's being orange. They can pack quite a punch, even if they of course remind me a lot of Violet Beauregard from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory if it became an attack. His design I find to be really cool too, as is the design of his brother Pearl. Although he's related, Pearl is actually against his brother and Master's actions. Unfortunately, because he's related to them, the other Guardians initially had doubts towards him. However, he is of course one of the good ones. Good old Usagi knows that there is good inside him. After all, Chibiusa, while on her way to a cookie contest, actually befriends him early on and even gives her cookies. He's also in possession with a magic flute that is able to cause magic shenanigans to happen. I like the relationship he had with Chibiusa, even if it was short-lived. And then there's the main villain herself, Queen Badian. She's pretty menacing and her motives are pretty sinister, and she's even able to take others' powers and to trick Sailor Moon by trapping her in a dream with a fake Mamoru. I'd say out of all the villains, she might be my second favourite. Fury from the Sailor Moon R movie is just a bit more interesting in terms of his past, so that's why she's only number 2. And that's not all. 3 heroines that you saw in the previous season make a grand return to this movie. That's right! Sailor Uranus, Sailor Neptune, and even Sailor Pluto all make a return to this movie. Like I said in my Sailor Moon Super special review, to have the outer Sailor Guardians being something Supers related feels very surreal, but I'm not at all complaining. They certainly help to make the action even more fun than it already is. But of course it's not something that's there from the start to the end, because they don't appear properly until the last 25 minutes. But them being in it at all is great, and feels like a nice reunion after a season literally didn't have them. Again, why can't Supers have more appearances from them? As I said, the action is epic and satisfying, and the story that plays throughout the sections feels beautifully done. The locations that they visit in this movie are quite lusciously designed too, and of course, as is the case with every Sailor Moon thing, Sailor Moon herself is brave, showing how much of development she had. Really, the only thing I find very odd about this film is that Pegasus doesn't appear, and don't even so much as mention him once in this entire movie, not even during the final attack. So I think out of all the Sailor Moon movies, outside of Diana appearing and how the Sailor Guardians go to their super forms, it's not that big a deal if you don't see Supers in its entirety. But I'm not complaining whatsoever because the climax at the end is excellent and epic if I do say so myself. Overall, I'm pleasantly surprised by this movie. I was expecting this movie to be the weakest movie considering it's based on the weakest season. But no, This could actually be the second best Sailor Moon movie. The action is intense, the story is really exciting, the villain is quite threatening with not only wanting to destroy the world, but to literally use children as their energy source. And all the good stuff combined makes this one of the best Sailor Moon movies. Sailor Moon R is still the best one, but this is a very close second. Plus with the Supers element and the Outer Guardians making a grand return, it feels a bit like a cross between an S and Supers movie. But still, give this a go if you can, provided you have enough experience with the series like I did. A series that's only 8 out of 10 gets a movie that's worthy of a 10 out of 10, and that's the most amazing thing I said today. Now is that time for me to see another Sailor Moon short. When was the last time I saw one? Like during Sailor Moon R? So yeah, this one is Ami's First Love, and I'm especially excited about this one because it focuses on Ami, who she herself is a cutie. This is a short that played before the Sailor Moon Supers movie, so how about a quick look at it? This short has her receive a love letter from a secret admirer. As someone who was never really the most romantically interested in the series, she was always more focused on her studies. This came as a massive surprise. Not to mention, while she, under the alias Mercury, got a perfect score in the mock exam, another person under the alias Mercurius also gets a perfect score. Ami thinks that he's asking for a challenge, but Usagi thinks that she's overthinking. After some time though, she gets more and more excited to meet this Mercurius person. I love how we get to explore another side to Ami that was never tapped before, and whenever she wears glasses it makes her look even cuter. However, as a spirit named Bonon comes over to strike her and get into her inner desires, Ami constantly thinks it's Mercurius despite constantly being told the contrary. Yeah, I know the short is a very simple story, and even the action is condensed because the short is not designed to be action-packed. As a matter of fact, Ami is the only one to transform here. But hey, I think Sailor Moon is deserving of a more comedic-focused thing, especially since the humor is pretty strong. I love how it goes on about how even though Ami is the smart one, even she has her weaknesses in terms of love. Cute short overall. And of course it feels good to see Naru and Umino up here one last time. So here we are. We made it. Watched through 4 seasons, 166 episodes up to this point, 3 movies, 2 shorts, and 1 special. And this is the final season of the entire classic Sailor Moon series, Sailor Stars. This is it. The moment we've been waiting for. Additionally, this is the only season that Deke or Cloverway never bothered to dub due to licensing issues. Meaning that for this season in particular, the Viz dub is the only option if you want to see it in English. Good. And so what do I think? Honestly, after what I saw last season, this is a massive improvement. To begin with, the filler episodes are vastly reduced. The previous season had a good amount of filler episodes that didn't really bring the plot along too much, kinda ruining the pace a little. But I am happy to say that it's much improved because I felt it flying by from start to end. The fact that this is the shortest season at 34 episodes helps too. I also like how after Sailor Moon S, all the girls are now in the same high school together. Yay! Not to mention all the stuff from Sailor Moon S, aka the best season, is finally brought back. We see the reborn Hotaru and Dr. Tomoe come back for a little bit, which is awesome because I was honestly missing them. Not only that, but Sailor Uranus, Neptune and Pluto all come back, which is always excellent to see. Where the hell were they the previous season? And granted, although they don't appear in every single episode, they at least appear enough to make it more of a continuation to S than Supers was. And hey, when Hotaru grows and we see her as Sailor Saturn, it feels great to see her kick some more booty. If you're wondering what comes back from Supers, well, Pegasus ain't one of them. Diana, Chibiusa's cat mentor, and Luna and Artemis's daughter, makes occasional appearances in the first few episodes and only has a few spoken lines in the series. That and Nehelenia actually returns for the first few episodes, and she wants to exact revenge on Sailor Moon and Chibi Moon for trapping her into the mirror realm. She is able to create mirror monsters, and she also managed to possess people from gazing inside the mirrors they have, and in particular Mamoru, to prevent Chibiusa from being born. But as I said, this is only for the first few episodes, like a mini arc of sorts. And apart from that, Supers isn't a big season you need to see, so it's sort of tightening the loose ends to that season if you do decide to see it. As you can imagine, like always, the animation, humor, score, and action is awesome. And even like the new theme song to the season. Although I do prefer Moonlight Densetsu a bit more, I still really enjoyed this theme. And Christ, the emotional feels are once again strong as they can hit you as early as episode 3. They really don't waste any time throwing any punches, and I was not expecting it so soon. Well played. Of course, that's not the only time it happens. Unfortunately, it appears that Mamoru has moved away to America to study abroad, so seeing them kiss one last time feels really strong. This season also introduces another Sailor Moon form, Eternal Sailor Moon. By using all the Sailor Guardians' united power, both the inner and outer ones, she managed to get this new form and have it for herself afterwards. Her transformation sequence and song they use is quite simply majestic and lovely. Even her rod gets a mighty upgrade, and the sounds they use and the sequence they use, man, it's all amazing. Where was this throughout the 4th season? Even her design is pretty badass and cute too. I like the addition of wings, her longer pigtails, and the fact that her normally red-heeled boots become white. Her final move that you can do as Eternal Sailor Moon feels very immense and grandiose. Man, comparing the arsenal from this to the beginning is night and day. Now when we see the Sailor Starlights, the season well and truly starts. Ku Seiya, Sailor Starfighter, Ku Taiki, Sailor Star Maker, and Ku Yaten, Sailor Star Healer, make up said Sailor Starlights. When they're first introduced, they appear as a boy idol group called the Three Lights. Every girl is in love with them. Minako, Rei, Makoto, and even Ami. But they are revealed to later be a group of guardians, and they're not even boys. I actually like how also later on they move to the same school as Usagi and her friends, and similar to characters like Haruka and Mitsuru initially, they have different chemistry whether they're in their civilian forms and in their sailor forms. I also like how Seiya is hot-headed, Taiki is smart, and Yaten cares for animals. It shows that they all differ personality-wise, but they are also trying to seek a certain person that will help to save the galaxy, the princess. At first they think that Sailor Moon is said princess. In fact, the songs they sing even have lyrics that feature said princess so that she can listen. But of course, it can't be. I like the music that plays when they become Sailor Starlights, and when they transform the music is really damn funky. And interestingly, their outfits are quite revealing, more than their main guardians, which is interesting. The idea of them is pretty fascinating because it taps into the idea of there being Sailor Guardians that aren't strictly stuck into the solar system, but rather the entire galaxy, which is crazy. Also, whenever they appear with their own theme song, it makes me think that they're the Tuxedo Mask this season after Mamoru moves to America. And with Seiya in particular, I like how she interacts with Usagi. Not only does she call her bunhead and tease her like what Mamoru did in the beginning of the series, but Usagi also has a bit of a rivalry with her too, though they eventually have a bit of a calmer relationship together as the season progresses, which is par for the course when it comes to Sailor Moon. They even go on a date! That of course helps grow their chemistry. Interestingly, Haruka and Michiru feel skeptical with them because they are outside forces, even though Sailor Moon, in her optimistic and redeeming way, thinks that they are actually good. I like to think because of their chemistry they have with each other, Seiya could be like the Mamoru of this season. And honestly, I'm convinced the real reason this didn't have an English dub back in the day when they had the chance was because considering how they changed Zoisite from male to female in season 1, and how they changed Haruka and Michiru to cousins, how would they find a way around characters that pretend to be a boy idol group but are actually Sailor Guardians? Especially since that Seiya and Usagi have a bit of a relationship in this series, and how they are non-gender conforming. For any Chibiusa fans, I got sad news. After the first 6 episodes, she returns to the future, so we never see her again. Her quest is over. However, to make up for this, we get another character, Chibi Chibi. She is mega adorable, to the point that I think her and Chibiusa would be great friends if they met. She floats along in the sky with an umbrella, and she meets up with Usagi in the park and follows her everywhere she goes. She even becomes a new member in the Tsukino household, similar to how Chibiusa was when she was first introduced. She's a mysterious character to the point that we don't know where she comes from. She also has a very limited vocabulary, mostly saying Chibi and copying what others say. They suspect that Chibi Chibi is the second child of Neo Queen Serenity, but Setsuna feels like she is a suspicious character. She does also disappear at random times too, which adds to her mysteriousness. In addition to all that, there is another Sailor Guardian, Sailor Chibi Chibi Moon. While touching Sailor Moon's tiare, she manages to pass off energy between others and become a Sailor Guardian. She even manages to give Sailor Moon new powers too, improving on her powers even more than I could ever anticipate. Man, her moveset are ever expanding, and who'd have thought that Chibi Chibi was the one that made that happen. And it turns out that she gives off a smell once she handles a burner with incense in it. This smell gives up the hint that she might well be the princess that the Sailor Starlights are seeking, Princess Kakyu to be precise, who I might say is a sweet and knowledgeable character who I've really found fun to learn about. Also, Sailor Chibi Chibi Moon has the power to teleport too, showing there is a lot more to her than meets the eye. Sailor Galaxia is the main antagonist of this season. Yeah, Sailor Guardian is a villain as opposed to a hero or even an anti-hero. She is able to send Sailor Amima mates, who are parts of Shadow Galactica, down to Earth to gather the Sailor's seeds, similar to the Pure Heart Crystal from Sailor Moon S, so that she can claim the entire galaxy as hers and destroy all the planets. Man, not enough did they take over the Earth or the Moon. Sailor Galaxia has to take over the entire freaking galaxy. I'd say this makes her a very strong and threatening villain. Plus, she also kills off any Sailor Amima mate that fails her. So yeah, she's a pretty ruthless villain, which I think I liked more than Queen Nehelenia. I mean, she doesn't even have any remorse to kill off the people Usagi loves. It makes literally every single villain in each season prior look like a saint. The first Sailor Amima mate is Sailor Iron Mouse, and she is also the first person to find the person she needs to extract a star seed from. If the star seed turns black, then it turns out it's the wrong seed that she got out, and that the previous owner turns into a phage, who are essentially rogue Sailor Guardian monsters. And yes, even men can turn into those, which I find very funny. She can be quite a lot of fun and bubbly and cute too. Sometimes I can feel a little sorry for her though. The next one is Sailor Aluminum Siren. She's a lot taller and a lot older than the last one. When she's not working, she tends to be more klutzy and more polite, even towards the people she's supposed to be stealing star seeds from, much to the chagrin of Sailor Lead Crow. But she's a lot more ruthless in battle, especially when she feels confident that Sailor Moon has a true star seed. It makes her feel more fleshed out than the last one. Speaking of which, Sailor Lead Crow is a third of the Sailor Amima mates. For her, she can definitely be a bossy character, and she can easily lose her patience, especially with Sailor Illumina and Silent, and later on Tin Nyanko. I think she might be the hottest of the Sailor Amima mates, and she is easily the most determined out of them, and she doesn't take shit from anyone. Sailor Tin Nyanko is the fourth of this group. She tries to always backsass the people she's with, Sailor Lead Crow in particular, but she can be pretty ruthless too. I really love her, but then again, that could just be because I have a thing for cat ladies, like Catwoman and Catnappé from Shaolin Showdown, so that could just be bias. She could also be a really good double crosser, but she was also brainwashed by Galaxia, and she was initially a true Sailor Guardian before this. I think that makes her really deep and fascinating. And man, when we get to the end of this series, it gets really good really fast. I love seeing how the conflict between the Inner Guardians and the Starlights were after they learned their true identities, and how Usagi and Seiya are separated. Also how Usagi learns about the story of the Sailor Starlight's past. And hey, that burner is a miracle worker too, and be able to bring Princess Kakyu back, the princess the Starlights were seeking. The backstory of Sailor Galaxia, etc. And of course, the emotions felt about this time too. And man, the finale is just impeccable. It doesn't feel too rushed, too padded out, too contrived, just right. And there is more, but without going into too much detail, let's just say, you know how I felt about the finale of Sailor Moon Season 1? Well, take that and turn it up to 11, because that's exactly how I felt about watching the finale. And finally, no spoilers, but chaos is completely merciless. Hot, but merciless. So overall, a part of me wondered if this is the best season of the series, honestly. Or if not the best, definitely up there with Sailor Moon S as my favourite. Really, all the seasons are great, but I haven't really felt this way with the previous season, so I'm just happy to feel this way once again and give it a 10 out of 10. It feels more like a proper continuation to Sailor Moon S than Super's. The new characters felt great, the new location of the school gave the series more air to breathe, the story felt dark on the same level as S, seeing Chibiusa have closure was pretty sweet, and everyone else as well. Furthermore, it has the series' greatest and roughest adversary. It's just a huge improvement overall. Not to mention seeing Usagi trying to cope without Mamoru felt very heart-wrenching, but also an interesting new chapter. So thank you, Sailor Stars, for offering a satisfying conclusion to a beloved and classic anime. And with that, we can finally close the Sailor Moon book. What a ride it's been! I laughed, I cried, I got invested by the characters, romance, action, punishment in the name of the moon, and just about everything else. I've come to appreciate the approach that Sailor Moon has to the villains she comes across, and that we even see a bunch of them get redeemed. I loved how well written the romance was, not only with the characters like Usagi and Mamo, but with other characters as well, including LGBT ones like Haruka and Michiru, or Kunzai and Zoisite. I love how the series had an excellent balance between humor and emotion, and how it juggles between both flawlessly. I love how the chemistry between the characters was, and also how the characters have evolved in terms of development. I enjoy how the villains have a great balance of ones that are both enjoyable and fun, and despicable and heartless. I love the message it has that violence is not always the answer, and of course the music in this series is iconic, and so is the fighting and transformations. Even in the series' weaker moments, I can never bring myself to hate any of it properly. I can definitely see why people love the series so much, and why it won the Twitter poll I set up back in April. Would I watch through the entirety of it again? Honestly, sure. Maybe not super soon. But hey, if me planning to get the DVDs of the series means anything, it at least says that I'm willing to revisit the series as much as I want. So yeah, this is an absolute masterpiece of a series, and if you haven't checked it out even recently, I really recommend you do. It's really sweet and exciting and teaches nice things about friendship and love. Maybe sometime I'll check out Sailor Moon Crystal and everything it offers, but I think I'll wait a little bit until then. I wonder if I should try watching all the episodes again while skipping all filler episodes and see what happens. Well, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Well, that's the entirety of Sailor Moon, covered by myself. This is World J 2012 signing out. The Moon Knight is a messenger of love.